Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Munoz, CEO of the Cultural Communications Agency, D Flash. Each episode, we bring on a different business leader who's doing some game-changing work. And this episode, I am so excited to have Marjorie Spitz, who's the president of the Small Business Division at Balance Integration. She has a remarkable career journey and story, and it's going to be a great conversation. Take a listen. Hey, Marjorie.
Hey, Laura. Nice to be here.
How's it going?
It's going great. I'm so thrilled to be here with you. I've known you for a long time, so it's good that we're doing this.
It took a little time. It took a little time. But yeah, so you listen to the podcast, you know the story. First question, always the same. Always fascinated by the answers. So Marjorie, what was your first job?
So it's such a good question, right? Because when I was thinking about my first job, I want to talk about two first jobs. I know a lot of people do that, but
you can break the rules, go for it.
So my first job I was the fitting check girl at Macy's in Huntington, Long Island. And I was young to run the cashier, do the cashier portion of things. And it was really interesting because I'd have to give people a number when they walked in. They want to try on some clothes, and it was a very vulnerable place for them to be, right? Because they are trying to look hot. and it also just happened to be the plus size area of Macy's. And there weren't a lot of those in those days. There weren't a lot of places where women who were normal sizes could buy clothes. So I felt a strong pull to really help people in a vulnerable position to pick out what they looked their best in, so it was really fun. It was really fun and social. Of course, you kind of learn how sloppy some people can be.
I always say to people, if you want to learn how to work with people, work in retail. You can always tell the really good managers who worked in retail because they treat everybody really well, because you know how unusual, how stressful, how weird it is to be in a retail setting.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And the second is, be a waitress, which is my second job. Be in hospitality, right? And so the other job I wanted to talk about was I was a catering waitress at a place on Long Island, and worked lots of weddings, right? And when you're working a wedding, right, you just want to make everything perfect. I was a perfectionist. The bride and the groom, you want to make sure they have a special day. And this place in particular had a really beautiful outdoor garden that if the weather was nice, they would then have the cocktail hour out there. And, I had the trays with the shrimp, which everybody, flocked to. But at a particular time of year, they had, those moth caterpillars that would just be everywhere. Do you know what I'm talking about? Those little brown ones or furry caterpillars. They would just plop onto the trays all the time during that season. So I'd have to, sort of delicately pretend they weren't there and just flick them off and not hit them.
Oh my God. Oh.
Because can you imagine you're the bride and this thing falls on your, your hair and stuff like that?
You're like, oh my God, what do I do?
But it was really fun. I mean, it was very social. You got a good workout in between too. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Fantastic. All right. So from retail and catering to now, the pretty wide swath of stuff you had to get to where you are now. What was that career journey like?
Yeah, it was really an interesting path. I've been really blessed in my career because I've worked with some amazing people that helped guide me along the way. And so I started my career, I fell in love in college. I fell in love with advertising. So I started my career in advertising as an account management person. And I worked at shops I started big, Ogilvy, and I worked at creative shops like Kirschman Bond, Deutsch, and Mad Dogs and Englishmen. And I worked at some of those agencies when there were 40 people. So not the agencies that they are today, these big, owned agencies. And so it was really amazing. And at a time where we just kicked butt and we worked really hard. And what happened was during that time, I was running account management at Mad Dogs and Englishmen. Are you familiar with that agency?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like it sounds, right? Dogs running around, all-nighters, lots of parties, lots of hard work.
That was the age of that was the quote unquote golden age of advertising. A lot of folks I know.
Yeah, great creative, lots of creativity and and freedom to do some things. And so I was running account management there. I was 29 years old and things seemed like they were just going great. Like on the outside, I looked, terrific. If you look back at pictures, I'm like, oh, I look pretty darn good then. And then, we were winning new business and doing great work. And I would be quoted in the New York Times, all that good stuff. And I woke up in the middle of the night one night with debilitating chest pain, thinking I was having a heart attack at 29 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was crazy. And it turns out, I found out after exploring it that I had chronic acid reflux, which had permanently damaged my esophagus lining as a result of the way I was managing the stress of being a high performing woman, in that environment. And so it really surprised me because I thought I was freaking fine. I thought
you had no idea. You thought you were thriving. Yeah.
I had no freaking idea that my body was suffering like that. So it was a wake-up call, or, it really took me by surprise. So I worked for amazing people who allowed me to take a leave of absence and go get some perspective and do some self-exploration. And I went and I traveled all over the world, and I came back and I decided that I still needed some time to process and to figure out what I wanted to do and how I can be a high performer as well as being a healthy individual at the same time. So I actually started my consulting business back then. I went back to waitressing, if you could believe that. I waitressed at a place called the River Run in Tribeca, which is no longer there. And then I started my consultancy, my freelance business. At the time it was Mojo Consulting, where I would work for different agencies and things like that as a freelancer. So I was sort of working from home and doing this remote working thing in like 1996. So what's going on right now?
So you were way ahead of the curve, is what you're saying.
I guess I was. I mean, who knew? But yes, at the time. But yes, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the flexibility. I certainly was on site on and off, because technology wasn't what it is today then. And so I was doing that for a few years, and then I decided that I wanted to get into the nonprofit space because I was always volunteering and really wanting to dedicate time and energy to causes that I believed in. And I started working as executive director for nonprofits like a gun violence prevention organization called PAX, which positioned the issue of one of public health and safety as opposed to politics. So getting into really about culture change, and Swim Free, which was helping children and adults get educated and feeling confident through learning to swim, especially in underserved communities. So I started to really dive into that space, which I loved as well. So, in the advertising world, as you know well, I learned my branding, my marketing, my how to get crap done, even though I was sort of responsible for everything but in control of nothing, I was able to make magic happen and multitask and learn how to manage people. And then in my nonprofit life, I learned how to run an organization, how to ask for money, which is important if you want to run a business, and how to work with a board. And that was, about a good 15, 20 years into my career when I also at that time was doing it as a consultant. So I was dabbling in full time, but really always going back to my consultancy because I wanted to work in multiple fields. And bringing it all together, when I really thought about what was making me happy and bringing me joy, it was when I could help an organization, a business, or a people thrive. And so that kind of brings me to what I do now in terms of, I got my health coaching certification. I got my compassionate leadership certification to work with entrepreneurs. I've studied the 3 vital questions and the empowerment dynamic technique. And I now am, as you said before, I work with small businesses. I help them grow and understand if they need to pivot or not, or how to create a team that's going to work. I put all these skills together that I've learned through my advertising and my nonprofit life and put them to use to help businesses thrive as well as individuals. So I do executive coaching as well. So it makes sense now, but at the time you might have been like, well, where is that path going?
Right. You're like, okay, sure. So it's interesting because like you decided at like 29, you're like, yeah, I just can't work with this agency in the world anymore. Like it's literally killing me. I similarly had at 29, the same kind of thought process. Because like that was when I was working for a tech company. But before that, earlier in that same year of my 29th year, was the last agency that I ever worked for before having my own, because similarly, it was basically killing me. So who knows what it is about age 29, where you're just like, you know what? No. This is,
right.
I gotta walk away from this.
There's a confidence that you build, when especially you're good at your job. I was very good at my job, and so that when it comes to that point of not even balance, like balance is an overused word, but that point of what do I want to contribute to the world? What kind of person can I be and bring and still bring my whole self? And how can I do that in a way so that I'm a healthy, thriving human being? As opposed to a burnt out, sickly person who by the time I'm 40 is going to be in the grave,
Well, that's the thing. It's like you do that and then you're like, wait, I can't function anymore. And yeah, I mean, that's not to say that like I figured it out when I went out on my own. It still was a very bumpy and weird and wacky ride, but it was my bumpy, weird and wacky ride, as opposed to being like contained by weird agency politics. So I completely understand. So,
yeah, something about having your own business that takes the politics out of it. And you're absolutely right. Like having that control. I mean, I don't have it all figured out. Like I still have my days, of course, but I'm aware, which is nice.
Yeah. You kind of know it's your mess and you can figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about a time when you were like, especially probably when you were in the entrepreneurial world, where you're like, you had a challenge and you're like, there's no way I'm getting through this. And then you did.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in a lot of the work that I've done, I've worked in a lot of smaller companies, hence my love for small business, and a lot of sort of considered startup-y kind of companies. And, that very often can entail very creative, yet very high stress individuals, right? So a lot of times I was sort of the person smoothing things over to get things done, whether it was meeting a deadline or elevating the work. Sometimes you'd have to work with, whether it's a client wants one thing and then the creative team wants another thing, whether it's two co-presidents or whatever who are not getting along. So what I've really learned from that is to focus on the outcome that I want. And not just that I want, but that is best for everybody involved, which not everybody can see. And sometimes I can't see, right? But when I can take myself out of the conflict that might be brewing. And there's always conflict. Conflict doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but there's always like, oh, I love this, but I don't like this word. Or, oh, I want it to go this way, but I have a different way of doing it than this other person does. And so how to resolve that? And so you asked how to overcome it. It's really been about how do I keep myself focused on what I want the end result to be, and be flexible enough to change the path to get there. So it's not a straight line, and understanding it's not a straight line and it's okay.
And it's totally okay. Like that's not the end of the world at all. We will get it fixed. You will figure it out. You will find your way.
And it's fun, that makes it fun, as opposed to I'm only going to go this way. And if anything sends me off in the wrong direction, I'm screwed.
And that it just isn't the case, and you will totally find your way. Looking back on it now, what do you think you'd tell 25-year-old Marjorie?
Well, I have very often been what I would call a rescuer or a fixer, which is a very problem-focused orientation, right? So I probably could have had more growth opportunities if I focused on what I'd like to call the big rocks. That big rocks exercise? That's, should I share that? So
go for it.
Yeah. So, there's a pretty, famous professor video that if you have a bunch of rocks, right, and then you have some sand and some pebbles, and you have a big jar that you need to put them all in, right? If you put the small rocks and the sand in there first, the big rocks don't fit. However, if you put the big rocks in first, and then you put the pebbles and the sand, they seep into all the little nooks and crannies, and it all fits, right? So what's the metaphor there? The metaphor is prioritize the big rocks first. Those things that are gonna really move your business, that are gonna really move your relationship or your life, as opposed to the small things that are check the box things. Like, for example, your email, right? Okay, your email is always gonna be there, and it's important, do not get me wrong. But if I focus all day on my email only and be very reactive, I never get to that big strategy thinking or that big helping my clients map out a future that they want to accomplish. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, totally. Yeah, no, that's a really good example.
Yeah, I would tell myself to focus on the big rock, stop being, such a fixer, and, allow yourself the time to focus on these big things and learn and grow sooner, as opposed to later where I had to do more of it myself, and just through self-actualization and things like that.
Got it.
What was yours? What would you tell your 25-year-old self?
Are you asking me questions on my podcast, Marjorie?
Oh, sorry.
Look at you breaking all the rules. Just full of trouble. What would I tell 25-year-old me? I know. The person that you are at 25 is not the same person you're going to be at 35. But the person that you and the work that you do between 25 and 35 is going to change your life. It is going to be very hard, but you're going to find your way. And how you like being cool with all the quirky people, and they kind of all gravitate you. That's going to be the defining aspect of your life, and you should embrace that, because your ability to understand people who most folks don't understand will pay you back in spades and give you the most rewarding, fulfilling aspects of your career by the time you turn 40.
Wow, that is beautiful.
See, if someone does ask me a question, I have an answer.
I had no doubt, but I was really curious about your answer.
Oh yeah, because it's funny, because I feel like I've had 4 stages of adulthood, from 21 to 25, 25 to 30, 30 to 35, and 35 to now I just turned 41. And each bucket of that has been a wildly different version of myself. So
nice. But you've allowed that to happen, and you've allowed yourself to grow. And I think that I want to commend you on that, because a lot of people are just very fear-based, and they don't allow that kind of growth. And then they wake up and they're 55 and they're like, wait a minute, I hate what I do. I don't like the people around me. How can I change that before it's too late?
Yeah, I think it's, you never know where you're going to end up. And I think there's been so much change in the last 15 years in all of our industries, and the world that we have. Like, if you think about it, 15 years ago, there wasn't social media. And, we didn't all carry a video computer in our pockets. and how that changes so much in how we communicate and how we live. And that short span of time has meant so much to so many different people. So it's fascinating to see how the world has just changed. But you can either be like, that's really scary, or hey, you know what? I'm just gonna go with the flow. And I think oftentimes we forget that, like, it's okay to go with the flow and and you'll figure it out along the way. You don't have to press yourself to solve everything by the time you're 30. Like, I get a lot of younger folks who are like, I haven't done stuff by I'm 30, I'm gonna be a failure. And I'm like, I haven't figured it all out and I'm 41 and I'm happy about that, because the journey is cool. It's all right. Like, it doesn't
that's such a good point, Laura. Such a good point. Because I've been mentoring my one of my nephews. Can you imagine looking for a job, your first job in this environment right now, right? So I've just been trying to just help him be accountable so that he continues to apply for jobs, etc. Get some guidance. The interesting thing is he really wants his perfect job. And I so respect that. When I started, I was like, let me just get in somewhere and I'll work my way up. There's a little bit of a different attitude right now. And I'm trying to, given the environment, sway him a little bit more towards, let's just get in somewhere. This perfect job doesn't exist,
Well, I think it's, and it's a common thing. And I'm on the fence about it, because on the one hand, similarly, like, I respect the heck out of you wanting your perfect job, but I also live in the real world.
Right.
And I think that for as much as, Gen Z wants to be individualistic and I can do all this stuff, like, I get it, but we live in the real world. The world isn't easy. It just is not easy at all. And I think this was you have to realize that, like, sometimes you do have to, like, take a step back to take a step forward. And I think that actually builds character around it, as opposed to it just being a perfect situation. And because if you have everything that's perfect, when something does go wrong, then you're gonna freak out and then have a horrible reaction. So
totally. When my first job I was a secretary making $16,000 a year at Ogilvy and Mather, and the woman who hired me, who was in HR at the time, I'm still friends with her today. And when she left that agency, she went to another agency and hired me there. And when she left that agency, she went to on the client side, and their agency was looking for somebody, and she recommended me and hired me there. And we've dabbled with working together since. So the idea of getting your foot in the door somewhere and having those relationships that will be lifelong relationships is a concept that I think we have to really share and explain to young people, because I think they're so used to that quick hit, with social media, that the idea of networking is actually a little overwhelming to a lot of young people.
Oh yeah, they think it's like the worst thing on the earth, and it's like, and I'm like, it's just building relationships, and like, people mean stuff. It's like, it's not about your TikTok video. Like, that's gonna be here and go on tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to sound like an old lady, but like getting back to basics and having some of those relationships that you keep in touch with over time will nurture you, no doubt.
And help you in ways that you wouldn't even imagine. It's like, like when I was making a joke about like all the quirky people that kind of gravitate towards you, like, that's literally how I built my business.
Yes.
By building a company that, like, made people feel welcome from all different walks of life. And those folks came to our events, those became part of my network and became friends, and we worked on products together. But if I had been like, well, what can you do for me right now? Otherwise I want to talk to you. Then it's like, that's not how this works. It's like you build, and it's a slow build.
Absolutely.
And it takes time.
It takes time and it takes effort. And I think this, I recently launched a webinar series, Small Business, Big Impact. And I just put it out there a little bit, and and I reached out to some people that I hadn't seen in, decades, and they're coming to it. Like, these are people that we haven't spoken in a while, but we still adore each other and we support each other. And that's the kind of relationships you want to be able to have when you look back during the span of your career. Whereas if you burn any of those bridges, I know it sounds, typical, but those people don't want to help you if you sort of ghosted them or screwed up their project or whatever and didn't take accountability for it, all that stuff.
And it's like, if you build those ways, you're in the trenches with people, you've been through the fire, then, you get it.
You get it.
You just find your way. So
and that's why we need people like you and I and others that we know, right? But just to sort of help keep people on track and accountable with their messaging, with their, with their where their career or their business is going, etc. It's just a simple smarts, time, pausing, accountability, commitment.
That's all you need. But thinking about all that and doing all the work that you do, like, what do you do for your self-care? Like taking care of Marjorie.
Taking care of Marjorie. Yeah, I am much more aware of what my body needs now. And for me, given the pandemic and my close circle, I'm a very social person. And I really miss those dinners with my friends and things like that. We do. Yeah, I really miss it. But in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, a few of my core friends and I set up a weekly Zoom call, and I am Zoomed out just like everybody else is. But, at the same time, seeing those people, just staying in touch, hearing what's going on, because we haven't been together in a room in over a year.
That's the thing. It's crazy.
It's insane. Yeah, it's insane. So that's really helped my sanity to I love my husband and everything like that, but I'm spending 24/7 with him right now, and that's not what we necessarily just were.
That might not be the ideal.
I need my girls. So they really feed me. So keeping those relationships strong. And I've actually recently started one too with some of my high school buddies. Like we haven't. There's 4 of us and we haven't been in touch regularly in a really long time. And we've been doing something monthly as well. So it's just been really nice to reconnect with people. That really fuels me. And of course, getting fresh air and nature and walking outside. A must.
Yeah, you must get some fresh air. We must get some nature. It's just important. I know, I totally get it.
Yeah.
I think, getting all those like reconnecting with folks that haven't talked to them forever. Like I've done a number of those over the past year, and similarly zoomed out to the high heavens. But the chance to reconnect with some folks or just strengthen some bonds with friends who you were good friends with before, but because we're always so busy, you don't have to spend a ton of time together. But with the core bubble that we have, it's been really rewarding to have that. So, it's as we now begin to emerge, it's like, what are the things that we sort of keep and what are the things that we let go of that we sort of held on to during the pandemic? So it'll be fascinating to see how that all kind of shakes out for all of us and see where we are now.
There was an article too, I don't know if it was the Wall Street Journal or the Times, but it was very much about teaching some people how to be social again. It was like literally.
Yeah, I saw that.
Did you see that?
It's like, how do you make friends? It's like,
I know, it was very funny. I was like, are we going to kindergarten? But I guess some people really need that, right? Some people are not social beings. Some people are introverts, and they've kind of enjoyed this time where they don't have to see a lot of people, right? So.
Yeah, no, I know I have had some friends who, just for any number of reasons have really not been out. And so it's been, as they've begun to emerge, it's been a challenge for them. So like I've been sort of pounding from the rooftops of like, as people say, oh, this event's like remember people's mental health right now, that folks are not ideal, not in the best of circumstances. And it's weird for folks. This has not been easy, and just because people might be single and don't have kids doesn't mean it's been great for them either. Like it's been challenging for everyone, and you don't know what people's states are. So you have to be good to people.
Absolutely. I was speaking to a woman yesterday who I've known for a long time. Won't mention her name, but she lives alone, and she lives in a remote area in a house. So it's not like, I'm in the city right now, so New York, so I can pop out of my building and go for a walk and see some people and at least know say hello to somebody, or she can't do that. And it's lonely, and it's bringing out things, and people, you bring up mental health. It's such an important thing to ask people, not how are you, right? But how are you?
Like for real.
Yeah. Tell me the truth. Tell me what you need and how I can support you. I mean, don't make it a, a bitch session, but, like I really, really wanting to know how you can support people is really important right now, because some people are really suffering and you don't know it because they're not showing it. It's hard to see that on a video.
It really is. And so that's why it's like, check in, how are folks doing? Not everything has to be a Zoom call. It's, pick up the phone and call people and, just let them know that you're there. That's why I say people do the 5 for 5. Like, just say hello to folks, because you never know. Someone might be having a struggling day and they see a surprising warm. They're like, hey, how are you? Like, love to catch up. Someone thought of them today, and that could be the first person who's thought of them in like weeks. And how that can help someone. So like just being good to others is so necessary at this moment.
Yeah, I have to say, as a result of this, I've met some people I never would have met if things were as usual. I've had to put myself out there on, weird Zoom online networking calls and things like that, and then you're like, oh, I kind of want to meet that person and understand a little bit more about them. And, I never would have met that person, even though I do a lot of networking. So maybe that's something that we can say has come out of this, is that it's really opened up opportunities for you to meet people all over the world that you couldn't have before if you were sort of business as usual.
Exactly. So here's hoping to more connections that are meaningful. So last question for you. Do you have a give and or an ask of the audience?
Well, I thought about this because I knew you were going to ask me this question, right? And I actually have 2 gifts. Can you do 2 gifts?
You are more than welcome. Go for it.
So I have a favorite tool for small business leaders, and a leadership tool that I want to share with everybody. And so I made a quick video of it. And it's like a 2-minute video that I'll send you a link, and people can go and review it. And it asks people to 3 questions to consider, and to help them with whatever it is that they're challenged with at the moment. So that's the first give. And if they want to take advantage of the second give, I'm happy to talk them through it. They can book a 30-minute whatever with me, and I'm happy to talk them through it. So that it's because it's about an orientation about how they approach things, and it's not comfortable. So sometimes you're like, yeah, that's easy. But when you put it into practice, you need somebody to guide you. And whether it's somebody else or me, it doesn't matter. But I just want to offer that up as another gift.
That's awesome. So we'll throw all those details in the show notes so folks can try that out, and hopefully book a little time with you to kind of walk them through it, because it's always helpful to, when you're going through something a little bit more uncomfortable, to have someone guide you through that. You're not out in the wilderness by yourself. So that's a wonderful gift. Thank you so much, Marjorie.
You're welcome. You're welcome. If it's too comfortable for them, then they're not doing it right.
Got it. I had a feeling that's what you'd say.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for having me. This has been
awesome.
Wonderful.
Like, Marjorie, you're just a delight, and just chock full of wonderful information. And it's so great to finally have you on the podcast. And as I said, we'll follow up with our show notes, let everyone know how they can connect with you and a lot of different places, as well as try out your give. So thanks so much, Marjorie.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Awesome. And that is our show.